On October 4th, 1957, history was made when the Soviet Union launched a beach ball-sized satellite named Sputnik into orbit around the Earth. The launch of Sputnik was an important turning point in history because it marked the beginning of the space race, which was important not only because it led to the establishment of NASA, but also because of its visible effect on popular culture. The story of Sputnik begins back in World War II when German rocket scientist Wernher von Braun invented the V-2 or Vengeance Weapon 2 rocket. The rocket was capable of carrying warheads weighing up to 1 ton, being launched from any location, and had a speed that made it nearly invulnerable to anti-aircraft guns. When Adolf Hitler first saw it, he was convinced that it was the weapon that would win him the war, and it was clear he was going to need all the help that he could get. Von Braun's team of scientists realized the chances of the Germans winning the war was becoming less likely by the minute. Their solution was to surrender to the American army, who was moving through Western Europe hundreds of miles to the south. Von Braun managed to get a train to take 525 scientists and their families to Bavaria, where they would be captured and taken to America. The scientists were happy to have someone to fund their work, and the Americans were happy to have someone get a leg up in their rocket program. It was a win-win situation. After the launch of Sputnik, the Americans realized they would need some kind of organization to even be able to compete with the Soviets. Their solution was to pass the Space Act in July of 1958. It established the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, and laid down guidelines for how the administration would be run. It also stated that its main purposes are the expansion of human knowledge of phenomena in the atmosphere and space, and improving upon the usefulness, performance, speed, safety, and efficiency of aeronautical and space vehicles, among other things. The Space Act was important because without it, NASA wouldn't have achieved such things as the reusable spacecraft, satellites, or much more recently, landing a rover the size of a car on Mars. NASA doesn't only make spacecraft, though. They're also responsible for things you might use in your everyday life. Things like satellite TV, scratch-resistant lenses, and tennis shoes.
The way that our shoes are made today are because of space research. When you look at a shoe pre-1960s, you're looking at a Converse, okay, with a flat bottom on it. But then when you look at athletic shoes today, you see how the front of it is narrow and the back is taller. And this isn't a great example of it, but it gets wider like this. Well, that's because of moon boots. When they were doing research on how somebody was going to walk on the moon, they realized that if they had a flat-soled boot, they were going to tip over because of the weight on their back. But that's one little thing. Smoke detectors, solar calculators, Velcro, you know, all of these different things came about because of the space race.
The launch of Sputnik had more than just a political effect. It brought about a worldwide interest in science and space that could be seen everywhere. Artists like Robert Rauschenberg and more famously Andy Warhol began incorporating space into their works. Children started playing with toys that incorporated outer space, and a whole new subgenre of music, space rock, was created. It wasn't hard to see that Sputnik had a strong effect on popular culture. Wernher von Braun was born on March 23, 1912 in what was then East Germany. He grew up with an interest in space thanks to the writings of authors like Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. It was this interest in space that compelled him to master trigonometry and calculus, as well as join the German Rocket Society, VFR, at a young age. In 1932, he went to work for the German Army, developing ballistic missiles. Wernher von Braun is considered to be the most important figure in the space race because of his many contributions, and it all started with the V-2 rocket he designed under Hitler. It was a very accurate rocket, capable of causing mass panic in Germany's rivals. Even so, von Braun and a team of scientists surrendered to the Americans. Eventually, he helped them create the Saturn V rocket that would later launch the Apollo 11 craft to the moon. Wernher von Braun was a very prominent figure in both the American and German rocket program, which makes him a very likely candidate for most important person in the space race. While von Braun was an important figure in the space race, his work would not have been possible without Robert H. Goddard. In fact, without Goddard and his discoveries, there might have never been a space race in the first place. Robert Hutchings Goddard was born in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1882. As a child, he would sit in his yard and think of space. Eventually that interest paid off in 1926 when he invented and successfully tested the world's first liquid-fueled rocket. The reason that the invention of the liquid-fueled rocket is so important is that it is widely considered to be the most useful type of rocket. Unlike solid-fueled rockets, you can actually control how much fuel is burnt at a time. But Goddard's achievements don't stop there. He also applied 3-axis control, gyroscopes, and steerable thrust to rockets. Overall, Robert H. Goddard is a very important figure in rocket science as a whole. Apollo 11 may have been America's finest moment in the space race. It was the first moment where everyone was sure, whether they liked it or not, that the Americans had pulled ahead of the Soviets. The men on the mission were Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. During the actual mission, Collins stayed in orbit in the command module, while Aldrin and Armstrong took the lunar module down to the surface. Armstrong landed the lunar module successfully, with just enough fuel to get back up to Collins in the command module. For 3 hours after they landed, the 2 astronauts on the moon performed final checks before Armstrong stepped on the moon and said 11 words that will live in the hearts of people around the world forever.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The 3 astronauts made it back to Earth safely and lived as heroes in the hearts of many. After the mission, people didn't talk about it as a triumph of the Americans, but as one of mankind. Even during a war between the world's biggest superpowers, this moment managed to unify everyone. The Apollo-Soyuz joint mission is widely considered to be the end of the space race. It was the US and Soviets' first joint mission, showing that the two nations had decided to put aside their differences and work together for the benefit of both countries. The mission itself was for an Apollo spacecraft to dock with the Soviet Soyuz. They launched within 7 hours of each other and docked over the Atlantic Ocean at 12:12 p.m. After docking, a crew member from each ship shook hands, and afterwards they ate together, exchanged gifts, and performed science experiments, all while speaking in each other's languages that they had learned in preparation for the mission. The mission was considered a success, both technically and for public relations. The founding of NASA and the creation of the International Space Station, or ISS, are both things that might not have happened if it weren't for the launch of Sputnik. The foundation of NASA is particularly important because of its discoveries in our solar system and beyond, as well as its advances in technology people use in their everyday lives. The creation of the ISS is important because it serves as a more or less permanent place for scientists to conduct experiments that can only be performed in that environment, like how life reacts to low gravity. The launch of Sputnik led to the space race, which resulted in billions of dollars lost for both the Soviets and Americans. The Apollo program was America's most expensive space program, costing about $145 billion. It is estimated that 108 billion people have ever lived, and out of those, only 528 have ever been to space. This raises the question, why spend so much money on something that most people will never experience in their lifetimes? Most of the money in NASA's budget comes from American taxpayers, most of whom will never see the thing they themselves are funding. Another downside of the space race is the pollution it left behind. A study done in 2009 shows that rocket exhaust contributes to ozone depletion. Recently, rockets have used cleaner fuel for the environment, but the ones that still burn fuel similar to the ones that cars do burn millions of pounds more in a matter of seconds. Another side of the pollution is all of the old satellites that gradually drifted out of Earth's orbit, boosters disconnected from rockets, and other debris floating aimlessly in space. Before humans ventured out into it, space was a pristine environment. Now a small part around Earth was littered with trash. If it hadn't been for the launch of Sputnik, two of the world's most powerful countries wouldn't have felt compelled to launch so many rockets into space, polluting it. The launch of Sputnik was an important turning point in history because it marked the beginning of the space race, which was important not only because it led to the establishment of NASA, but also because of its visible effect on popular culture. Without it, we might not have such things as the reusable spacecraft or scratch-proof lenses. The two forces involved in the Cold War might have been more violent and directly attacked one another instead of finding a more productive way of seeing who was better. The United States and Soviet Union would be billions of dollars richer, even though it would mean we'd know a lot less about the environment around us. All in all, the launch of Sputnik was a good thing, because even though there was pollution and lots of money spent, the United States and Soviet Union both pulled out of this competition in better shape than they were before. The launch of Sputnik shows us that sometimes things have to get worse before they can get better.